Good evening. I want to share a cell life principle with you tonight. I recall resolve all conflicts. So let me ask you an icebreaker question. Do you enjoy conflict? Some people actually like conflict. Most people don't. Tell me about a time. Tell each other about a time where you avoided conflict, where you did whatever you could to try to avoid the conflict that you knew was there. You knew there was something there. You knew there was an issue that needed to be processed, but you avoided it. Why did you avoid it? What was the result of avoiding conflict? Did it go away? Sometimes it does. Or did it simply get worse? And so then when things finally did happen that brought out the issue, it may have been worse than if you had dealt with it at the beginning. Tell about a time, if you had one of these, when you actually dealt with a conflict head on and you dealt with it right. What were the results of that? And so take a moment to discuss this area of conflict, and you can press pause on the video and then come back in a moment. Matthew 18:15 says this, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault, between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother." In other words, if you know somebody has something against you, go and try to resolve it. Every family has conflicts, and as a small group, we're like a family. The issue is not do we have conflict, because conflicts will arise anytime people are moving together in the same direction. But the issue is, how are the conflicts resolved? Withdrawal is not an option. You can't just withdraw from your family. Or if you do withdraw, you sever the relationship, and that's worse. Gossip is not the answer, or backbiting one another, telling everybody else about the other person's fault. The Bible calls that sin. But that's not the answer either. Silently enduring the offense, just kind of staying quiet and not saying anything, that only leads to bitterness and resentment, because you know something's there and you're not dealing with it. And so instead of meeting that head on and talking about it, you're just remaining silent, and things just get worse. The only way out is to actually calmly approach the conflict head on, to bring it up in a non-threatening way and say, I sense that this is something that's going on between us. How can we resolve this? You ask good questions to establish what has actually happened. And you give and receive forgiveness as necessary. You may know somebody has something against you, and so you go and you say, okay, what's going on? Why do you have something against me? What did I do? What did I not do? And you allow that person to talk. We talked about listening a couple of times ago. And so you listen and you hear that person, and then you bring resolution if you can. You may receive forgiveness. You may ask for forgiveness. It's whatever the situation calls for. None of us do things exactly like everybody else wishes we would. We all do things that get on people's nerves or that offend people. But the thing is, can we bring resolution to those conflicts? Can we agree on things? Can we compromise some things in the sense of coming together for the sake of the relationship? This is a critical phase in the life of your cell, the life of your small group, because conflicts do arise. And if you don't deal with the conflicts, you're not going to enter into the level of community, of relationship that God has for you. When you deal with those relationships, then you are able to enter into a level of community. That's where God can work. It's a little bit, maybe you've witnessed this with two boys that are 8 or 10 or on the playground, and they're playing and they get mad at each other and they start fighting, and they're tackling one another, they're hitting one another, and they take a couple of minutes and then people pull them apart, and it's almost like they needed to get that out, and 5 minutes later they're best friends. What's happening there? Well, they resolved the conflict. They may not have done it in the right way, but they resolved the conflict. And many times when you and I will resolve conflicts one to another, when we are able to resolve those conflicts, it leads to a much deeper level of relationship. It's like we need to clear that out of the way, and then the Holy Spirit can work to draw us together and move us forward in relationship. A couple of questions to consider. Conflict is really a natural part of relationships. How have you handled conflict in the past? Have you done it well? Or have you waited and waited and waited and then ended up blowing up and getting angry and saying things you didn't want to say and alienating people in relationship? Do you like to avoid conflict, or do you work it through? In our groups, it's important that conflicts are addressed quickly and with resolution if possible. What about when you have a difference of opinion? What if your brother thinks that you've sinned against him, but you really haven't, and you don't consider that? Many times we're offended when someone disagrees with us, or when someone thinks they know better than what we do. And many times no actual sin has been committed, but we have a difference of opinion, and we need to recognize that that's what it is. You think one way about a certain situation, I think another. It doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. It just means that it's different. And if you can recognize that and accept one another and accept the differences that we have with one another, but realize also that that doesn't mean we can't be in relationship, doesn't mean that we can't be on the same team, doesn't mean that we can't be working towards the same goals. Knowing the difference is important in resolving conflicts. Are these just opinions, or is there actual sin involved? In resolving conflicts, the tendency is to try to prove one person's opinions right over another person's. And one of the things I've learned is it's more important to bring life. Sometimes you don't need to share your opinion. Even though it may be your opinion and it may be the right one, you don't need to share that. Sometimes the best thing that you can do is remain silent, or perhaps agree. Jesus said this. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except by me. We understand that. He did not say, I am the way, the truth, and by the way, I'm right. He didn't make it a right or wrong issue. He made it a life issue. So in resolving conflicts, the question is, what's going to bring life to your relationship? Perhaps humility allows you to say, I may disagree with you, but for the sake of the relationship, I'm going to choose not to share what I think or not to share what I feel because I value our relationship. What's the major things that need to be resolved? What's the minor things that can be let go? Knowing the difference can mean the difference between relationship or alienation. Tonight, for ministry time, do you know someone that has an issue with you? An issue that you need to resolve. And maybe that person is sitting across the room from you in your group. I want to encourage you to take the time tonight to go to that person individually, maybe not in the presence of the whole group, and initiate resolving that conflict. How can we get past this? How can we both come out of this with a win? What's holding you back from doing that? I want to encourage you, if there are issues that you have that you know with someone, maybe they're not in the group, that you pray into those situations. That as a group, you lay hands on the person and pray for God to provide the opportunity to restore the relationship, to resolve the conflict. Take time now to minister one to another. Be blessed.